Here's the subject of this week's video. We got this Martin HD28 in here. Fella brought it up here yesterday, and it's about a 94 model, I believe he said. He bought it new, never been worked on. He's messed with the nut a little bit, widened some of the slots out in it, and the binding came off, and he tried to glue it with some Gorilla Glue. Got glue all over it and didn't get it back in shape like it should be, and I told him I'd do the best I could with that, but I couldn't guarantee a seamless repair on that. But he's got a little wear on the frets, and so it needs the relief is just a little bit excessive, but it's not really bad. But I think we'll try to adjust the relief on it, adjust the truss rod, and we're going to try to file these frets down and recrown them. The wear's not real excessive, and I think when we get the frets fixed on it and get the nut slots fixed, I believe it'll be alright. So that's what this video is going to be about. They make a little tool to pull these pins with, but that's the tool I use, and it's always worked mighty well for me. You just go across the saddle and use that saddle for leverage, and it'll pop those bridge pins out of there. I always like to keep these bridge pins in order. The slot I take them out of. These old bridge pins look to me like they've had the best of their life. See how they're bent? One thing I always like to do when I get these guitars in is to check the tuners. This wood shrinks up over a period of time, and they'll nuts will work loose on them. And anytime you've got something loose on a guitar or a musical instrument, man, these are loose, very loose. Anytime you got something loose, it's subject to create a weird noise for you. We're going to use this little fret rocker. It's a homemade one that I made, but we're just checking for high frets. He got about 40 thousandths height on these frets left. 35 right there. So what we suggested was to file them down and recrown them, and we think that'll solve his problem. We've got a little homemade fret file out here, and we put some shot bags on the back of the guitar to steady it while we file on it here. That's got the slots cleared up, the wire cleared up. We're going to go down through here and check it with this tool here. Feels like they're true. Now we got some electrical tape, just plain old electrical tape that we bought at I think I bought this several rolls at Harbor Freight a few years ago. I used to use masking tape on these on this part of it, but I found that this electrical tape is a lot tougher, and It holds up a lot better, and I hadn't had any problems from using it, so that's what I use these days. So I won't film all this. You've seen how it's done. I just do the same thing all the way down through here. Now we got our little 3/4 safe edge file. It's one I modified as I learned from my old buddy Frank Ford. And we ground the edges down where it doesn't cut into it, but we still like to cover the fingerboard with something to keep from marking it. This little chalk that I'm putting on here to keep the file clean. So we're rounding these frets back off, putting the crown back in. That's the way we do it. Now I'm not going to film all this. I'm going to do the same thing all the way down through here. And you can imagine just what it's like, but it's all just alike. The next step that we do, this is a little piece of art gum that I bought years ago after I read it on Frank Ford's website. And a piece of 400 wet or dry sandpaper. And we start working on these frets with this sandpaper, smoothing them down a little bit, polishing them. And as we did on the other part of it, I won't show all this, but we're going to go down through here all the way with this 400 grit paper and this piece of art gum and smooth these frets out. Now we're moving up to some 1500 grit paper wrapped around this art gum. And we're going to polish these things a little bit further. Well, we took the masking, the electrical tape off this thing and worked with a little 4/0 steel wool and some 1500 grit paper and got this fingerboard and frets polished and trued up. And so I'm going to show you, it looked like we took a lot off of these frets, but and we still got about 32 thousandths of an inch there at the second fret. Let's see. Here's the third fret. We'll measure it. It's 31. Let's see. Here's down to 5th fret. It's 30. So we didn't take just a few thousandths of an inch off of that, and should play better than it ever did. We're going to concentrate on this nut. We're going to use these nut files to clean this slot out with, and if we need to, we'll fill them with that UV cured dental material. I know a lot of people mix up super glue and bone dust and use super glue and baking soda and several different things for this operation, but Frank Ford had an article about this, using this dental material, and I've used it several times, and it's hard. It's harder than the bone is, I think. So we got these slots cleared out with the proper sizing files, and I'm going to put the old strings back on it. This saddle, you can tell it's not bone. It's phenolic, I believe. I probably need to make him a bone saddle. I always mark these things when I take them out. I've got some bone, unbleached bone, that I just bought here a while back. And I think that'll make him a good saddle. One thing I didn't say though, I'm going to hold off on making this saddle until I get everything fitting and set to action with the new saddle. I don't want to copy the size of this if it's not right. And we're going to measure the height of these frets, at the first fret, the nut slot off the first fret. Now we're on the first string. We're going to set it to 0. And we've got about 14 thousandths clearance on that first string. That's within the tolerance that I like to have. The second string is about 23 thousandths. It could come down just a little bit. The third string is about 15 thousandths, which is acceptable. The fourth string is about 15 thousandths. That's acceptable. And here's the fifth string. And it's about 21 or 22 thousandths. That's acceptable. And the sixth string is about 22 or 23. So actually, the second string is the only one that, in other words, we took about the same amount of off the top of those frets in the end as what we filed off of the nut. So we're still in pretty good shape. It doesn't work out that way very many times, I'll promise you that. Got this thing at full tension, and we've got a capo. Let me turn this around where you see that capo. We got a capo on the first fret holding the strings down. We're going to measure the relief, and we're going to match this string down here and get about halfway out. Yeah, that's about 12 thousandths relief. Now I'd like to get it down just a little bit lower than that. And we got an Allen wrench in here. So what I need to do is to see how much I need to take off of the saddle in order to achieve the action that we want. I'm putting this under between the fret and the string. That's mighty close. Let's see, that was 24. Let's see what 25 looks like. We're at the 12th fret now. That's right. Now, let's see what the first string looks like. That's pretty good. Now we got 25 thousandths that it's too high. We're going to have to take 50 thousandths off the bottom of that saddle in order to get the action down to where we want it. Twice what it measures here. That's halfway down. So we're going to take 50 thousandths off the bottom of that saddle. We're going to do our practicing on this old saddle, and we'll make a new one to match it when we get done. But we're in the process of marking this bottom of this saddle. We're measuring 48 thousandths of an inch here, and that's close to the 50 thousandths we're shooting for. We're going to lay this down on our little jig here. And we're going to make us a mark with this knife here. It represents 48 thousandths of an inch. We're going to move it over here. We're going to make a mark here. Now the reason that we're using this razor blade instead of a pencil is that it makes a mark that doesn't have as much width on it as a pencil. I don't know how well you can see that mark, but that's the mark we're going to shoot for. We're going to take this over to, as old Frank Ford said, introduce this thing to Mr. Belt Sander, or Mr. Disc Sander. Now we've ground this saddle down. Didn't hardly go right to that mark, but we're close, and we're flirting with a saddle that's getting pretty low. Like all these Martins, sooner or later they're going to have a neck reset done on them, and this one it'll get by for several more years, but I wouldn't recommend resetting the neck on it at this point. But it's going to have a saddle down pretty low, and we're going to extend these ramps on the front of where the bridge pins go to let the string bear down on the saddle a little better. And we're going to use our Fordham tool with a little carbide burr in it, a little small size. Now that should allow the strings to bear down on that saddle a little better. And we're going to put this old saddle back in there. I found these old bridge pins laying around here, and I'm going to put these in here to get rid of those old bent ones. Now we've got the old strings in here because when we're twisting these things up and down, you're subject to break one, and I like to hold off on putting the strings on it till I get all this loosening and tightening done. Well, alright, we got it tuned up to standard pitch. Got this old saddle that we've cut down in here. Here's the 12th fret. Here's our little 7/64 measuring thing. And it's really close. It's not right on the money, but it's close enough that I'm happy with it. And that is 2. So we've helped the action, helped the relief, got the nut slots cut right, the right height, and this guitar should be ready to put some strings on and see what it sounds like. Here it is, strung up and finished with the old strings on it. We're going to put a new set of phosphor bronze medium gauge strings on it. The saddle's a little lower than I'd like to see, but it plays good, and it's not so low that I believe it'd hinder playing it. And it's probably got another 20 years or so in it before it needs a neck reset. Sounding guitar. This is just some 409 cleaner that I'm trying to clean some of the residue of that glue off with. We're going to take some about 1500 grit wet or dry sandpaper and go over this thing and kind of knock some of that roughness off of it. This is some 1500 grit wet or dry paper with a little water on it. We're trying to clean this residue off this thing. 1500 grit paper is fine enough that it usually doesn't hurt the finish. You can buff the real fine scratches it makes out. So I told the man that it wasn't going to be a seamless operation. Now we're going to hit this with a little bit of polishing compound, rubbing compound. Try to bring it back up to the gloss it had. Here's this thing after we polished it up the best we could. Well, we fabricated a new saddle. It's a bone saddle. It's unbleached bone. Fit it down in here. I think we're ready to put the strings on it. Here's the finished product. Got some new medium gauge strings on it. A new bone saddle, some new bridge pins. Got the frets all polished and crowned and leveled. I believe this thing will be good for a few more years.